and the other part of it for me was, I've been a fan of baseball since I was his age, since I was 6 and 7 or 8 years old, and collecting cards and doing all the things that he does, and I felt culpable as a fan. We all suspected in 1998 when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were hitting balls out of stadiums, much less breaking records.
Mark McGwire sort of blew up, literally. I mean, into this like master of the universe or something,
Yeah, and everyone suspected he was doing something. And when it came out that he was, I was one of the fans who kind of said, so what? That's his problem. But I really changed my tune as we got farther and farther into this journey, and felt like it was an important thing that fans needed to confront. And somebody has to step up. Nobody in baseball, has said to him or to me or to you for that matter, this is really wrong. They've said pretty much to a man, whether it's ball players or coaches or managers, it's a shame that this happened. I personally didn't do it. I don't know what happened, but nobody has come out and said this is terrible for our game. It's terrible for our players. We have to stop it. And I'm going to be the one who starts saying right now, no more, and rally the clean playing ball players to talk about this.
Well, like I think about, when Barry Bonds was on trial, and it was like a perjury trial, right? It wasn't so much that he had taken the steroids, but that he had lied about it.
Right.
Isn't that
in court?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Barry Bonds went before a grand jury, and they asked him if he had taken steroids, and he said, "No, I don't think I did." And so it's illegal to possess steroids now, and it's illegal to distribute them. But they weren't trying to get him on a possession. That was really the only legal framework they had to point out what Barry Bonds did, and he still kind of skated on it.
He kind of did. Yeah.
The jury finally came back and said we find him guilty of obstructing justice, but we're still hung on the question of did he knowingly take steroids. And let's bring it back to an 8-year-old. Are you okay? You with me here? An 8-year-old looks at me one day in the airport in Calgary when we were coming back from a ski trip, and he says, Barry Bonds is terrible. He should be kicked out of the game. And I was like...
My father said the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, what are you talking about? And he said, he took steroids, and, and his records are a sham, and Hank Aaron should still have the record. And I was like, well, yeah. But at that time, too, it hadn't come out, and the Mitchell report hadn't sunk in, I guess. But I said, well, Barry Bonds says he didn't take steroids, and he claims that he didn't know, he might have taken something unwittingly. He didn't know they were steroids. And Joe just looked at me and said, oh, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it.
Right, exactly.
Why?
And so an 8-year-old knows these things that we all know, but nobody is
it's
just
like
saying.
The emperor has no clothes. Nobody wants
absolutely.
to admit it. Nobody wants to actually say the words.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought that was interesting about your book is you did bring up the infamous Pete Rose thing. So Pete Rose is out for good, out forever and ever and ever. What about all these guys that have taken steroids? Is there an asterisk? Are they removed? What's the deal?
Well, Pete Rose, the other thing was he gambled, but I don't think that's nearly as bad as doing steroids. Like, if they're going to keep, Alex Rodriguez or Barry Bonds in the game, then they should, let Pete Rose's record stand. Because, he had the most hits ever and the most at-bats ever. So, just the fact that he gambled, which, is horrible, and he would make his team lose. But that's not nearly as bad as, doing drugs and making your body better and giving yourself an unfair advantage, and, yeah.
Well, and the point you bring up is a good one, is that, in the course of baseball history, commissioners have laid down the law.
Right.
In the worst scandal before the steroid scandal was the 1919 Black Sox. The Chicago White Sox threw the World Series. And it came out in 1920 that this had happened. and those guys actually were taken to court, and a sympathetic Chicago jury exonerated them. They were found not guilty, but the commissioner at the time banned them all from baseball anyway. And then Pete Rose, of course, was found after his playing career as a manager to have bet on games that his team played, and he was barred from the game, not only as a manager, but they struck all his records.
Yeah.
Which
is pretty
stuff.
harsh.
Pretty harsh, but we wonder now as fans, what about the steroid scandal? A lot of people say, well, they all took steroids, so it was somewhat of a level playing field, but they didn't all take steroids.
Right.
And the other thing about it is clearly the drug use turned people with excellent baseball skills like Bonds, Roger Clemens, Mark McGwire into cartoon superheroes, as you say. It really changed their ability to do things that nobody in the history of the game has been able to do. I can spout about, there's plenty of indignation to go around with baseball and with steroids. And that's the presenting thing in this book. But as it turns out, it gave me and Joe a great opportunity to travel around the country.
Absolutely.
Talk to people, go to ball games, talk baseball. And in a way that I felt we really had to do before we could kind of just go back to watching baseball games and making that part of our life.
So now at this point, can you two both say that you're still fans? And
what about you?
I like fairly. I like players like, Prince Fielder. He hasn't been proven, and for all we know, he could have done steroids, but I don't think he did, and I hope it's not another Manny moment. So just like waiting. And I still watch baseball on TV, and yeah, I like Prince Fielder and Justin Verlander and all them. So yeah.
But you see, it's really become a part of Joe's baseball framework and his vocabulary in a way that I don't think is going to change. The question of are guys still using, and we still have drug scandals.
Sure.
That. Ryan Braun was just accused of failing a drug test. He was the National League MVP last year, and was recently had his suspension revoked, and managed to appeal the decision. But it's now a part of Joe's generation of baseball lore that I don't think we'll get over. So in answer to your question, I'm still something of a baseball fan, but really a skeptical one. I'm still waiting for the game to address this in a meaningful way that hasn't happened yet.
And of course, it has to be said that when you were on Bainbridge Island, it was certainly much easier to go to a Mariners game. Now it's a little bit more difficult to get to baseball games.
Well, it's a little more difficult, yeah. Although, baseball's still baseball, and we have a team in Keyser, and we have a team in Eugene, and we have an excellent college team here in McMinnville.
Yeah, the Linfield team for sure.
Yeah. In fact, Coach Brocious was gracious enough to sit down with me and Joe at kind of a key part in the book where we had almost given up on baseball, and then spring came around, and we wanted to talk about it again, and we went and sought him out and asked him about his feelings and response to the steroid scandal, and it helped us a lot to really keep looking and come back to the game a little bit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I Jim, want to ask you about, I know you brought another book along. You've been writing for years and years, apparently. You want to talk a little bit about your other book?
Oh, well, yeah, I've been a writer for 25 years. Really wanted to do it my whole life. From high school, I was lucky. I think writing is kind of a calling more than a profession. And I for many years, I was a travel writer doing magazine articles all over the world. I traveled to 30-some countries on assignment, doing really fun stuff.
Wow.
From scuba diving with 100 sharks at a time in Tahiti to playing the golf courses of St. Andrews, and just lots and lots of fun stuff. So maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I had an idea for a novel that was really pressing on me and came from my own experience of my father passing away very young, at the age of 49.
Oh my goodness.
When I was just a teenager. And thinking about that and the grief that comes along and kind of stays with you for your whole life. And at the same time, they were talking about the healthful benefits of red wine.
Oh.
You know,
yeah.
They had isolated the substance in red wine that supposedly brings longevity, and they were studying it. And this all was in my mind, and so I ended up writing a novel, Fountain of Youth. And Fountain of Youth has to do with a guy in a small town, much like McMinnville. Actually, it's based on the town I grew up in New York State, getting his hands on a substance that very well may be something that'll keep you alive forever. At the same time, he's dealing with the long kind of guilt over his father's death and approaching his father's age of dying. And so Fountain of Youth is kind of a comic, kind of serious take on what would happen if we had that ability to prolong our lives. And at one point, I bring a ghost of a father back to meet with the guy and talk with him, or not talk with him, but be there with him. Something I think we all would love to do with departed loved ones.
Yeah, that's probably true. Well, I wanted to ask you, I know that you've done a lot of interviews maybe around this book or the other one, or some of the other work that you've done. You were on NPR at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gosh, 3 years ago, in April of 2009, I happened to be talking to the sports reporter of NPR, Tom Goldman, who's out of Portland, about a different sports story, and I mentioned that I was starting to really pay attention to my son's responses to the steroid scandal, and he said, "Oh my God, that's a great story." And so he came down to McMinnville, and equipped with his huge, microphone and recording pack, walked with me to Memorial Elementary to pick up Joe from school, and causing quite a stir.
Yeah. All the kids were like, wow, whoa, and they were like trying to touch him. And
yeah, are you going to be on TV?
Yeah, and so
goodness.
and then the reporter told us that he wanted to, what was it, like, get like me walking to school.
Yeah.
So we like drove home or walked home, and then we just walked to school.
Yeah.
And so I was like there for 10 minutes, and all the kids were like, wow, are you going to be on TV? Who was that? Like, what are you going to do? And I said, no, I'm going to be on the radio, and they're just coming to pick me up because they wanted to see what it was like
some ambient
to
sounds.
drive here.
Sure, yeah.
So, like, yeah, and so then they came back like 10 minutes later and picked me up, and all the kids were like, bye. So
Yeah, so it was very cool. We had a nice little segment on All Things Considered, just as the 2009 season started.
Well, I want to tell you both that I really appreciate you being here today and hearing your story, and wish you a lot of success with promoting this book. And you're going to get to do something that I've always wanted to do. I mean, you've already done that, gone to Fenway and Yankee Stadium and, all your travels in the baseball world. I think it's great. So
Yeah, thank you.
thanks very much.
Yeah, a pleasure.
thanks for having us.